Hello and welcome to About 6 Acres. I'm Juana and today we're in the kitchen because we're going to be baking bread. Now I've shared some videos of me scoring different patterns and different designs on bread, but I also enjoy the different techniques and the different flavor profiles that sourdough brings. And today we're going to be playing with spelt flour and bread flour. I typically like to do a mix of flours. I just feel like it tastes more robust. I had done a spelt loaf the other day and it was good, but I'm gonna try to up it up a notch just because we really like the nuttiness of the spelt flour. So right now I'm just adding some water, measuring out 375 grams of water. And typically I like to keep my water in a kettle. I feel like doing that lets the water come to room temperature, and when it does that, a lot of the chlorine and other stuff evaporates. To it, I'm going to add the flours, and I just want to make sure that I weigh it properly. So I am going to get a bowl and I'm going to do 200 of this if I have enough in here. I don't know if I have enough in here. The last loaf that I did was actually 150. So this is just taking it up a notch. And so I kind of wanted to do a little more because there's not that much in here. You know what? I'm going to do that. I'm going to do 250. Let's see how much I have in here. All right, so 284, don't tell anybody. So I'm just gonna go with 284 into the water. And then I'm going to do 220 of the bread flour. So I think I'm gonna have to open up another container. Now I like my bread content to be about 500 grams for my loaves. I feel like that's a good size for a bread loaf. I've done some other recipes that have a little bit less and it always throws me off. 500 total grams of flour, but I'm looking for 220 here. All right, so that's about 220 and it's gonna go into here. And then I am going to add some honey. So I'm going to do 30 grams of honey. And I'm adding honey in there just for a little bit more moisture. It doesn't really count into the hydration of the loaf from everything that I've read, but it does help add a little bit more of that moisture, so to speak. And in this case, I am doing an auto-lease, which basically means I'm going to mix all the flours and the water and let it sit for about an hour, just so that everything starts fermenting. And then I'm going to add, and fermenting might be the wrong word, but after the hour, then I'm going to add the salt and the starter. And basically I'm following the process that I did with my earlier loaf that I made. I like to change up one item at a time, and in this case we're changing up the amount of spelt, or the flour ratio. So hopefully it works. This actually came together really, really nice. I had a lot more struggles when I did the other one, so this one might be a very high hydration loaf just based on how nice it's mixed. So I'm just going to go get in there for a second and just make sure everything is in nicely. when I first started making sourdough, I didn't go crazy mixing in the first go around. I would basically just make sure everything was incorporated and then let it go, and covering for an hour. But then I found that you get a much more velvety dough, if you will, if you do mix it a little bit, you know, before you get to your mix and fold time. So that's just what I'm doing. It looks really nice and pretty. And I am going to cover this and come back in an hour to do the starter and salt. My dough has been sitting for an hour, and this is basically just the flours, the honey, and the water. And so now I'm going to add my starter and the remaining water, which is not very much, plus the salt. So I'm just gonna loosen it a little bit just to make sure there's nothing weird. And then I'm gonna add in the salt, which for the salt I did 10 grams. And that's the typical amount that I do on salt. I think that's when I like it the most. I've tried it with other amounts, and salt does slow down fermentation, so you don't want to put too much of it. But I do like my bread to have a little bit of salt, if that makes sense. And I'm gonna add some starter. Now, because this is looking like it's a little bit higher hydration than I wanted to, I'm not gonna add as much starter as I did yesterday. So this one, I'm gonna do 60 grams. Maybe I'll do 65. Yep, that's 65. So 65 grams of the starter at peak. And then I'm just gonna make sure it all gets well and incorporated in there. And it's a little bit of a messy job, and I feel bad because I know this is not the most appealing sound when you hear it, so sorry about that. Okay, so it's mostly all in there now, and because this is a higher hydration than I normally do, instead of just doing my normal stretch and folds, I'm gonna do a few minutes of slap and fold, which is also known as French kneading. So it's a little violent, and it's the best way for me to get all my anger out from the week. Basically, you just want a clean counter, and you're going to take your dough and slap it. And as you get ready to slap it, you basically turn it 90 degrees. So from here, you grab it, you flip it, drop it, and then fold it on itself. And some people will do this before they add the salt. I don't have enough experience to say one way is better than another, but I will say that each time I've done it after I've added the salt, and I have not had an issue. That, or maybe I don't know enough to know that I have an issue. It could be that too. So I'm going to do about 5 minutes of this, maybe 10 minutes of this, depending on how the dough feels, before I let it take a rest. And I'm not going to make you sit and watch all of this, so I will bring you back. So it's been about 10 minutes of slap and folds, and you might be able to tell that the dough looks slightly different. It definitely feels slightly different than it did before. I don't know, it's smoother. It's not quite relaxed, but not quite tight. It's a little bit hard to explain unless you feel the dough, I guess. But I'm finishing up, and then we will set it aside to rest for a little while. All right. There it is, just pretty as can be. So I'll come back and do a couple of stretch and folds a little later, or coil folds rather, a little bit later, but it's looking good. Everything is on track. So it's been 30 minutes and the dough has been resting. You might be able to see some bubbles. Some sweet little fermentation bubbles there. It's so nice. It's a jiggly dough, right? Because it's high hydration. So the liquid percentage is high. And we're just going to do some coil folds. Actually, let me wet my hands. That's important. Whenever you're working with a high hydration loaf, it's important to keep your hands wet so that it won't stick to you. So we're just going to go ahead and do some coil folds, both sides. It's just a nice floppy dough. So we're going to set it there and let it relax for about 30 minutes, and then we'll do another round of coil folds. Okay, I remembered to wet my hands this time. I'm just going to gently stretch this dough a little bit. It's just so velvety smooth. I think it's because of the autolyse. It helps so much. So pretty. So after this, I think I'm probably going to do one more stretch and fold before I set it aside to finish off bulk fermentation. This is going to be my final coil fold. My dough is starting to hold its shape a little bit longer, which is great. My hands are mostly wet. And I'm just going to stretch. It's feeling so good. Just so pretty. And it'll go into my bulk fermentation container. It'll sit in here for 6, 7, 8 hours, pretty much until it either doubles in size or it shows signs that it has finished bulk fermenting. Doing a quick check of my dough. Now this is the Spelt and bread flour, and you can see that it's fermenting. It's got nice little bubbles in there, and it still's got quite a bit of time to go. So I'm going to leave it be and go to dinner. have my oven preheating to 450. I usually like to preheat it a little bit higher than what the temperature of my bread will be going in. And I had my dough sitting in the freezer for about 30 minutes, the amount of time that it took the oven to preheat. The one thing I'll mention is, because I wasn't speaking in my other video, is that my dough was obviously very over fermented. I had let it sit out in the counter a little bit longer than I wanted to. It sat overnight. I didn't want to get up in the middle of the night, and so this morning when I woke up, it just had almost tripled in size. So I don't have high hopes for this, you know, expanding and looking big and puffy and voluminous. I don't even know what the words are, but all of those words that you would think of with a nice big loaf of bread. I think this one's going to be a little bit flat, but we're still going to bake it because sometimes things can surprise you, and we're really testing out more the flavor as opposed to how it looks. So already I see how it's expanded a bit more. So I'm going to try to score fairly quickly. The bread has been cooling off for more than an hour, so I'm getting ready to cut into it, and this is what it looks like. So some of the signs we knew were going to happen, right, with the having to sit overnight, bulk fermented a little longer than I would have wanted it to, but overall not so bad. Still has that nice crackle, and the honey makes it a little bit darker. Some people will put some rice underneath their, or on the bottom of their Dutch oven, just to control that a little bit, but I don't mind it so much. So obviously what the most important part is taste. So let's do that. Here's the crumb. Not a bad looking crumb. Actually looks pretty good to me. And let's cut a slice and try it. And I can tell you already, it smells very earthy. That's one of Nick's terms, but it definitely does smell nice and earthy. And you can just tell that it's a little bit healthier than what, you know, a white flour one would be. And it just smells so good. So let's try out this spelt bread together. So this is 280 spelt flour and 220 of the bread flour. Let's see what you think.
It's a lot darker. It smells more wheaty, obviously.
I expected him to say earthy. That's his tone.
It tastes more earthy.
280 too much or 280 good?
No, I think 280 is good. Again, I like that flavor of wheat. I like that nuttiness. It's, you know, there's more, obviously more flavor in that because it's got a toastier exterior and it's a lot darker. I like a lot the visual of the darkness of the crust. To me, it just makes it taste better.
I like it. I think I would step it down for me a notch on the spelt. Maybe do 250, which was the original goal. But overall, I mean, for a bread that went too long proofing, I think it's really good.
Yeah, it's still really good. It's still light in the middle. But I do like the caramelization on the crust. Very, very good.
So thank you so much for watching.
And as always, you're awesome and you are loved.
Until next time.